Well, good morning. I'll give you a little bit of an intro as to what our learning objectives are today. Kaleidescopes can be really an ominous subject matter to deal with. I'd like to kind of boil it down to a very simple thing. What we're going to do by the end of the day is make this. Kaleidescopes to me is a metaphor for life. So it's something that you have to put your own energy into. It may be an art form, but it doesn't do anything unless you participate. You have to participate in life. You have to manipulate the scope in some way in order to change the picture, the mandala, the image that you get. Some people come up and they take a scope and they go, and the images fly by. I think that's something that's a lesson for us all. Be in the moment. Just chill out. Enjoy what you see. That's part of the thing, is that once you get an image that you particularly enjoy and it's beautiful to you, it can be very fleeting. You can cough, sneeze, move, and it's gone. And just like in life, you can't relive the moment. You can't back up. You have an element of control, just like you do in life. You can control how fast you're turning the turret, or what you're manipulating the lights, or whatever it is. But there's always an element that you don't have control of. And so it's kind of an interesting thing to me that such a simple device is, got some profound relevance. I'll talk a little bit about the journey that I've been on and how I got to where I'm doing all this stuff. To give you an overview of how I kind of organized the day, we have a little slideshow where I'm going to sensitize you to a number of issues with making and designing kaleidoscopes. Then we're going to have a little video on stave construction and making a barrel. Hopefully I'll demonstrate some things and talk about some principles that I haven't heard from demonstrators or club members in the past that have been somewhat of value to me. And then we have a couple of other subsequent videos. One is devoted to mirrors. One is devoted to completing the project. And if we have time, the third one's on object cases, or these things. I started out in my grandmother's attic, rummaging around and find a kaleidoscope. And it happened to be a high school project that my dad did in shop. So that was my first exposure. But my dad was a research-based mechanical engineer, so it wasn't unusual I felt natural to tear apart an engine. Some of you people with the blonde hair that I have, you've heard of boron, gasolines, Ohio, fuel line freeze up, Duron, those are all his babies. So he put that into an engine and put it on a dynamometer and run it until the thing exploded or broke or whatever, and then changed the formulation for fuel additives and lubricants. But he gave me an engineering kind of perspective of things, materials and methods. So that's always been a challenge to me with this. It may be fun in a little bit of an art form, but every time I run into a problem, I don't have somebody on my shoulder telling me I can't do it. I'm too ignorant to know that it's impossible. So the new members of the group, that's kind of my hidden agenda here, is that I want to make this process discussion of making a kaleidoscope down to its very simplistic terms. But on the other hand, I also want to stimulate people with what is out there and how you can play with design, materials, etc., and perhaps increase your horizons. I'll tell you quite frankly, Uh, I'm not shy about public speaking. However, I feel very comfortable talking about malaria, typhoid, HIV, leprosy, etc. So I've never done a demo before. And I've never played with what I call a big boy lathe. For 60 years, I used a Sears $75 lathe. I was too lazy to change the belts, so I always ran at about 900 RPM. The ways, or the bed, was a pipe, and so it never really lined up the tailstock to the headstock. And in my early days, I would kind of refer to my tools as the straight one, or the round one with the groove down the middle. I didn't know that one's for a bowl and one's for, spindles and one's for whatever. So I've kind of gotten through the process and developed my own way of doing things in communication. About that will be reflected in my comments. When I went to school in Chicago, my shop was taken away. We lived in a third-floor apartment, and so I got ants in my pants. I wanted something to do, so I happened to be at I'll say an Ace Hardware, and they repaired broken windows, and I looked over in the corner and they had 3 or 4 boxes of broken window panes that they were going to throw out. And I said, well, what are you doing with those? And they said, throwing them out. So I said, can I have a couple boxes? And so I bought that and a glass cutter, and one of these basic simple things. Taught myself how to cut glass. When I got out of school and started in Bedford, I had a gentleman come in to say hello to me, and his name was Mike Paremba, and he happened to have grown up in Murano, Italy. And so he had done a number of the cathedral windows downtown, St. John's Cathedral and a few other churches down there. But he did hot glass work and stained glass work, and so I've done windows and panels and bead work. I have an oxypropane torch, so some people say, where do you get the junk that goes in here? Sometimes I make a number of the pieces. Sometimes I get them from Michael's, sometimes wherever. But anyhow, so the glass work was a perfect wedding with the woodwork to come up with a kaleidoscope. So for the last 8 years or so, I've been devoting more of my time to that. It's one of those things that it's an avocation. People tell me, put your stuff on the internet, and I said, well, I want to run it and not have it run me. And despite that, it creeps into your life. So since I have been self-taught, haven't had any formal training, started on a Sears lathe. In fact, just a few weeks ago, I graduated to a Nova Neptune. So I haven't really had the opportunity to play with that. So everything is done on very basic equipment. And so part of my message to you is you don't need sophisticated equipment. Knowing what equipment you have is better, I think, than having sophisticated equipment, in my mind. So I don't want you to be intimidated about the supposed fanciness of what's over on the table. You all should be able to do it. The young people want to encourage you to go out there and get a feeling for it, try it, and experiment. So that's part of the never say never. I've always enjoyed this particular group. I'm also a member of the Brewster Society, and both groups have a very open, nurturative, collaborative, collegial environment educationally, so that if you want to know something, there's a lot of talented people out here that can really answer your questions. Credentials. I don't know. When I give other presentations, they ask me for my fancy credentials or if I got any. Here I don't represent as having anything sophisticated except curiosity and experience. I have been very fortunate. I've now this year won a second Best of Show at the Brewster Society, and that was a Best of Show there on the right. So my kaleidoscopes have gone anywhere from $50 to $10,000 on the right. I've sold kaleidoscopes as far away as New Zealand, and I'm in a bunch of galleries. I've now started taking commissions. The guy called me up from Colorado, and he was a pharmacist who owned a big pharmaceutical company, and he wanted something with pills in it. So what I made for him was over on the table with a capsule, because that was the name of his company. He had in his title. I've been very fortunate. And my message again, I'll reinforce that you can all do the same thing. There's nothing magic about what we've been doing. One of the things that I found with using my tools was that there's basically, in my mind, only two types of cuts. A scrape and a slice. And it all depends upon how you present the tool to the wood. And any tool can be used either way. Maybe that's a little exaggeration. Anyhow, it was a beautifully done little finial with just one tool. And that kind of illustrated the same point. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So whether I'm using the straight thing or the round thing with a groove down the middle, etc. Okay, here's the other concepts in terms of safety. And I left one out. From the engineering point of view, vector. Vector is a mathematical and physics term that has to do with forces, amplitude, and direction. So I'm always mindful when I'm playing with the lathe is to know where my forces are going and how much force I'm using, which comes into the next thing, leverage. And there are several simple machines, a wheel with an axle, a wedge, screw, inclined plane, pulleys, and a lever. And so what we're doing on the lathe is basically using our tool rest as a lever. The advantage of doing that for people who are professional turners and are doing production work is you use less energy by keeping the fulcrum, that is the edge of the tool rest, closer to your work. However, it increases your sensitivity also. So everybody is looking, so you use all your senses. You look at the turned wood, you hear it. A lot of people will, in the demo will refer to what they hear in terms of chatter, the noise that the lathe makes, etc. But your holding hand also governs how much you're using in terms of resistance against the force of the lathe as the material is coming at you. Two extremes of that are this monster. This is a metal spinning tool. And here you cradle it and you're against a fulcrum in the tool rest, and you're using your whole body to put pressure on the material. Here in wood cutting, you don't want to do that. When I'm doing end caps or some of the fine work or putting the receiving portion in the end of a tube to put my bearing things, I'll use little tools and get the fulcrum close to the work so that I can use a very light, sensitive touch. The MSDS is the material safety data sheets. I'm sure many of you are familiar with those. In using acrylic glues, etc., that means stuff. Better read the material safety data sheets. in terms of dealing with glass, there's some inherent risk with cutting glass, just so you're aware. And most of you are all sensitive to the woods and the allergies, etc. Halts is something that I've taken from the brethren in AA. And people who are in AA are sensitized to HALT. That's hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So halt, don't do it. If you're hungry, angry, lonely, and really tired, don't go down in the shop and use a table saw. You know, so I have kept out of trouble by kind of keeping that in the back of my mind. Anticipate ahead. Everything that you do, you know, be prepared. Think what is the consequence to that activity. Pace is a key thing. When people get into a hurry, they tend to get sloppy. When you're rushed, maybe not the best idea. And the last thing I left off of there, and I'm loath to do that, is hand-eye coordination. In sports, it's very important, and when you're dealing with power equipment, look at what you're doing. Don't do this. You know, it'll come back and bite you. So those are the comments that I have about safety. Let's go to the next slide. This gets back into the Class 1 lever concept, and I'll talk a little bit about more on that when I'm doing the lathe work. Next slide. The kaleidoscope was invented by Dr. Brewster about 200 years ago, and he was a mathematician, physicist, and liked to play with reflections. There's several things credited to him, but the kaleidoscope is one. As I mentioned already in my introductory earlier comments, it's a participatory art form. So it's kind of funny when we have exhibits at art museums or the Strathmore in Washington, D.C. or whatever, and we usually have to have docents be at the exhibit hall in order to encourage people to pick it up and look at it. Because most art museums are, no, don't touch. But here, you participate. And so I've encourage you to look and see the differences. I tried to pick different kaleidoscopes. They're constructed differently, have different mirrors, different object cases. There's something unique about each one of those over there. There have been medical studies showing it lowers blood pressure. It's helpful to people with autism, so that there's applications in that regard. There are three basic components of a kaleidoscope: light, mirror systems, and something to look at. So the light is critical, and that's why I brought some auxiliary lights over there. Sometimes you take the scopes outside in the sunlight and it knocks your eyes out. I mean, it's a psychedelic experience. So if you feel comfortable, go ahead and do that. Sometimes the lighting is indirect. I brought a couple scopes over there that have internal light sources, one of which is you got infrared proximity sensors, so you can change the light and the intensity of it by waving your hand over the little portals. The one next to it has a button. If you push it 1 second, it'll have a white light from the front, which is different. All the other kaleidoscopes have light coming in from the side or from the end. If you push it for 4 seconds, you can change into an animated scenario, so that there will be a whole bunch of LEDs that will come at you in different configurations. So there are 6 of them. If you hold it for 4 seconds, let go, and then watch. Hold it for 4 seconds, let go and watch, etc. You can go through all those. The mirror systems, there's a whole video segment on that as to how to design them and configure them so that you get a consistent mandala or a quality image. And then lastly is the object case. And that almost can go for another day talking about the nuances of that. The simplest object case, and the one that Brewster felt was the best type of kaleidoscope, was a Kaleidescope, which uses just a glass sphere. And that is where you interact with your environment. So not something artificial that's attached to the end, but you can look around and really participate in your environment. So that's one of the reasons why we chose a Kaleidescope to make today. Lighting, as I already addressed, there's a scope over there that's cherry that has polarized filters on it. That gives a different palette. Ultraviolet ones, I didn't bring those, but somewhat triangular scope over there has diffraction grating on top of dichroic glass. So that gives more of a rainbow effect. It's subtle, but it's there. So you can manipulate the light in a whole variety of different ways to change your image. First surface mirror is the best, and it usually comes with a blue coating on the mirrored surface. First surface is on the top of the glass. So there's nothing between you and the reflective surface. A classic mirror, like in your bathroom, has the mirroring on the back side and then a protective layer on top of that so that the silvering doesn't get damaged. I don't know how well you can see it there, but first surface mirror is in the center here. And it gives a very sharp, crisp, clear image. It has 97, 95% reflectance. So there's no degradation of the image. Here, it's a fuzzy image with the second surface mirror, a standard traditional mirror from the bathroom. And if you can barely make out, there's a secondary image there. That's one of the things that Brewster discovered is you have light reflect as well as refract through the glass, and the reflected light becomes polarized. But it gives a fuzzy image. The original kaleidoscopes way back in the 1800s used standard glass that was blackened on the back surface. So it took it out of the picture, so to speak, and the reflection was only from the first surface, but there was no silvering. So you can get away with that. My dad's kaleidoscope was built that way, but as you can see, it becomes a very dark image. So the quality of the images needs to be something to be desired. The other thing is that when you have a second surface mirror and you bring the two mirrors together, then you're seeing the thickness of the glass where they come together. And so you get a line in the mandala and it interrupts it. So everything over there is first surface mirror so that you should be able to see the whole image without any interrupting lines. Collectors and gallery owners, they focus right in on it. They don't care about anything else, but they'll look at that right away. The best way to look at the image is at the vertex of the two angles coming together. So if you can get your little eye down at the where the two mirrors come together, that gives the most perfect round image. The farther you get away from that angle, the image becomes a little out of round. And so that's from a practical wood point of view. If you put the hole in the middle, that works for a 3-mirror system. Doesn't work as well for a 2-mirror system. Some of the kaleidoscopes over there, I think there's a brass one that you can see a triangular hole, and that's why. And the other thing is funny to say, but where there is no mirror, there is image. Mirrors only reflect what is seen elsewhere. So in the design, that's a helpful concept once you get used to it. This goes through the different types of kaleidoscopes. I'll parenthetically say that I've designed all this so it will ultimately be on our website. So don't squint your eyes here. But when the demo gets published on the web, these should be readily available to you. At break time or afterwards, if you want to come up and play with the mirrors, I've brought prototypes that I just play around with, and sometimes we'll make mirrors for different purposes. Tapered mirrors tend to cause an image that is spherical. I've been playing around with third surfaces, so rather than having it solid black, I've been putting stencils on and doing things. The glass scopes over there are designed by Mark Tickle, and they're quite unique. In fact, Mark's shop got washed down the river in Asheville last year, and then he had a heart problem after and needed heart surgery, so Mark was at great disadvantage. But anyhow, you can see his scopes have totally unusual mirror systems, so the images are not just simply the round stained glass window type of thing. So something to look at. We already talked about the marbles, object cases, there's wands. I think there's a wand scope over there that works on just gravity, and you see the things coming down in front of you. There's discs, so we've gotten representation of most of the different types of object things to look at. Object cases. So you don't need to get too intimidated by fluid-filled cases. There's pros and cons to that. You can use a dry case. You don't have to use an enclosure. If you're going to make a wooden tube, you can hollow out a second dimension, ID, that's a little bit larger, and then put a glass window on the side closest to the mirror and another one further out, and then just put loose material in there. So it doesn't have to be fluid filled. One thing that the fluids are contingent upon viscosity as to how well they kind of slow down the falling and changing the image. Kinetic or kinematic viscosity is how they measure that in centistokes. And just for a rough thing, mineral oil, if I recall, is about 100 centistokes. Water is about 30. Silicone oil, I have two different types here, 500 and 1,000. And glycerin is about 1,400. So that slows down the image changing substantially. Glycerin is hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs water out of the atmosphere. And so that if you put glycerin in an enclosed case like this over a 10-year period or so, it will actually absorb water out of the atmosphere through the acrylic, expand the case, and rupture it. So don't use glycerin. I preferentially use mineral oil because it's cheap, it's available, it's optically pure. If I put metallic objects in there, it inhibits oxidation or rusting of the material that's inside, and it works. Yeah. I've played around with a combination of fluids, so oil and water don't mix. Well, that's good. Put some air, oil, and water in there in the thing, and then you can manipulate the different interfaces and the layers along with what you have inside. How much to fill? You always want to leave a little airspace because of temperature, ambient conditions, heat expansion, contraction. So you never want a case that's completely solidly liquid. It'll break. And to burp or not to burp, that's a methodology to release the excess pressure. Once you put the top piece on and seal the case, you have a higher pressure inside than outside. Sometimes you can slide the top covering, if you will, and let the excess air pressure out and then slide it back. It's got to be done very carefully because you're also moving the glue or cement or whatever, and you can end up with a poor bond. Working with acrylic, cast acrylic is better because it's just, they pour the stuff in a mold and it just forms. So it's not having any inherent stress into it. Acrylic materials that are extruded are put in under pressure through a die, and so they come out and they have inherent stresses in the wall. So it's easier to machine cast acrylic. It's harder to do the extruded acrylic. The extruded acrylic will sometimes, if you get the glue or cement on it, it will more easily craze. You get all these little feathery things on the outside of it. We were fortunate when I live in Bainbridge, and right up the street from Aurora, which is where the McMaster and Carr warehouse is, and so I just go down the street and get what I want. The prices have gone up substantially, so there's a big difference in terms of cast versus extruded. But in this particular application, it's probably better. I would encourage you to spend more and be happier at the end. When you're dealing with plastics, there are special drills. They are formed at about 115, 117 degree angle rather than the 30 degree angle that a standard machine drill is. You can regrind your machine drills to get to the ones or buy specially designed acrylic drills. And all these materials, these plastics, are thermosensitive. So if you overwork it or you get too aggressive with what you're doing with it, you can melt it. That's a pro and a con. There's sometimes methodology where you can polish it with a light application of heat without having to use abrasives. So that's another kind of caution. When drilling the sidewalls, I use a number 44 bit and just slowly go through the wall at a right angle. And then I use a tap. And here's the secret. There are three types of taps: bottom taps, plug taps, and taper taps. Taper taps have the taper extended up the shaft of the tap itself. And that's the type of tap you want to do in here. The reason why is you don't go all the way through the wall. You leave the taper in the acrylics, so when you put this set screw in to plug the hole, it cranks down tightly. And then you have less opportunity for leakage from the liquids. So I don't know if that's of any help to people that already come up and said they get leaking. That's part of it. I also use a lubricant, which would be cyanoacrylate or super glue gel, and I liberally apply that onto the set screw and then torque it down and screw it in. And the glue is not really for the purpose of gluing in the set screw. The glue is to occupy all the space between the threads that are in the acrylic and that of the set screw. They don't fit perfectly, so there's going to be leakage. So you plug it up. If you're using silicone materials, you can use a silicone-based material as the lubricant instead, like E6000 or rubberized caulking material, etc. Lexel is another material that's good. And one thing is that when you're tapping, the thing I show you in the video about having a fancy jig, you don't need a fancy jig, just put it in a Jorgensen clamp or a little bench clamp. But the trick is not to go like this with your drill because you're going to wobble. So you have it at bench height, and so you're only doing rotatory activity with your muscles in your arm. I don't know if the people in the back can see that. So you don't want to wiggle back and forth or you're going to expand your tap. This is the acrylic solvent. As I said, read the MSDS. Use a needle applicator. I'll show you in the video how to do that. The rings that you make out of the acrylic tubing need to be perfectly flat. So you have it on a melamine or a glass surface or whatever, and tape the sandpaper down and go in a circular motion. And I use about 150, 180 grit because you don't want it perfectly smooth. That works against you. And in most glue applications, you use an abrasive to roughen up the surface so you have increased surface area to bond the two pieces together. Here, that's not the objective. You have enough of tooth, if you will, by having a rough enough abrasive paper in order for something. This is a dissolving agent. It liquefies the material, and so that you have liquid acrylic to bond one surface to another, and it becomes welded together. It's one piece set. So it's not just a glue. After you've done that, you can take a little piece of wire, and if the object pieces in the case get glued to the back surface, there's a period of time, a magic period of time in an hour or so, where you can go in and jiggle them around and loosen them up. Sometimes it's not bad. If you have one or two pieces bond to the back of the case, that acts like a stirring or agitating thing to mix the pieces as they're turning around. Okay, what goes in there, just let your mind wander. As I said, I sometimes do lamp work. You can do it at home with a propane or a butane torch with standard glass or stained glass. It doesn't necessarily have to be oxypropane, although it's a lot easier that way. You can just go into Michael's or Hobby Lobby. Use your wife's jewelry, I don't know. Make it interesting. You can have themes, like I have one over there with koi on the outside, and I have koi fish floating around on the inside of the object case. Mirror surfaces, top picture exaggerates how a three-mirror system goes together. So you want overlap all three ways in the same way each corner. So when you put it together, they all fit edge to edge, but there's a little bit of an overlap, and then you get a perfect triangle. I many times will draw out the same diameter of what I'm going to put the mirror into, and just kind of get a paper trial fit to guess how much or how I should cut my mirror in order to fit into the hole that I'm putting it into. One trick, and that is that pretend this is a mirror. Okay, so I've cut my width. Cut it a little longer than what you're going to put into the scope. And the reason why is that when you first put your carbide cutter on the end to run the long dimension, it doesn't always get there perfectly, or when you finish the cut, it may wobble a little bit as you come off the edge. And so that there may be a tag here and here. Then you can't fit the mirrors perfectly together. So you don't want those tags. So what you do is you cut it longer than you think necessary, and then you say if you have a 7-inch mirror and you've cut the 7-inch mirror for what you're going to put into the scope, but you've cut it 8 inches long, then you knock off half an inch there and a half an inch there, and you got rid of your tags on all the mirrors that you're going to put in. Does that make sense? The other thing that is, I will show you a fancy mirror machine that costs $400 or so, but this is all you need. A straight edge board that's 90 degrees to the face. I put blue tape on it so it doesn't slip around. And one of these edges, I use the hand plane. If you got a joiner, you can do that. The other one, I just ran on my table saw, and it gives a perfect 90 degrees, smooth edge, with no irregularities. The advantage to that is that when you're using the cutter, is that then you hold the cutter up against the glass, but also the side of the straight edge, and you come down so you're not wobbling. That again gives you a perfectly straight line that you can abut together and not have any gaps when you're putting the mirrors together. I have glass here if you want to play with it. I have several different types of cutters, and and you can practice. I don't know. I also have some circles, so you can play with circles. And a lot of people just cut glass like for picture frames and wanted to do a straight cut. But you can experiment. This is scrap glass. Do curves. Just get the feel of how it is. And there's different methodologies that you can cause it to crack. I'll warn you, though, that the first surface mirror is only 1, 2, or 3 millimeters thick. And so you don't put as much pressure when you're cutting the first surface mirror as you do with a standard window or float glass. So it's amazingly easy to cut. If you put too much pressure, you're going to crush it. So just be aware. That stuff's expensive too, so you don't want to boo-boo. So I'll tell you what, why don't we go to the body construction.
still of the night when it's quiet, we dance the sky.
How about that music, huh?
Run, 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 and run, yeah, we dance the night in the skies, in the skies. In the stillness of the night when it's quiet, we dance the sky. Run, 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 and run, yeah, we dance the night in the skies, in the skies.
There are a few steps in the process that precision pays dividends later. And getting the cuts correct and the glue joint nice really pays dividends later on. Now I mentioned that my Sears lathe is very limited capacity, so I have a different way of using the Forstner bits to get the hole down the middle. So in doing so, the ends, for my purposes, have to be at 90 degrees because I put them on a support. This is one way to do it. Now I have what I call my vertical lathe, which is a drill press, and so I put a brass bar in the chuck that's straight, and that's my reference. So I make the table and my support, and I got everything perfect 90-90-90 relationship, so that I'm boring down the center of the construction. This isn't probably necessary, but it just helps me line things up visually. Now, if you have a more substantial lathe, another way of doing the same thing is to use a Forstner bit and the tailstock and slowly drill through the whole length of the assembly. I've had to do a workaround, and even this is a little bit shortcoming because I only come down about 4 inches there. I have to flip it over, come down 4 inches, and then I put an extension on my Forstner bit and finish the bore through the center. So when you see the demonstration come around, you can see there's not always a perfect alignment when you're doing that. In fact, yeah. So we'll pass around pieces showing how far we are at the moment. Any questions? Joe, are you ready for me playing here, or?
Give me 1 minute.
Okay. Let me briefly talk a little more about what we're doing. The important thing in my mind for doing an end product like that over there, where you're having a turret that's movable and you have ball bearings in it, is it's critically important to have your ID concentric to the OD. So when I'm doing this, I could have short-changed all that process and put the end of my construction in a compression chuck, gripping it from the outside, putting the tailstock in and turning the tailstock round, and then flipping it and putting it in the compression chuck, and then finishing off the whole thing. I could have also then used a parting tool or whatever other tool you want to get the ends perfectly 90, 90, 90 and flat. I'm not into, what do you call it, production work. Kind of just, that's not my thing. So I'll do half a dozen, 10 things at a time, but I don't want to do 30 or 100. And so because of that, my chucking system is a little different. I bore the thing to 1 3/4, and then previously I've taken a piece of pine, which is softer than the woods that I'm using, so it can compress and even perhaps grip the wood a little bit better, and end up with some things like this. Now, in terms of vector, I don't want this to be a wedge to split my glued construction apart, so that I want more of the pressure from the tailstock onto the flat of my, I don't know, called jig or holding thing, so that it's compressed between the head and tailstock. So that way, I am sure that whatever I turn on the outside is going to be concentric to the ID. Everybody follow that? If you turn the outside first and then you bore the center, there's inherent wobble and error, etc. So I just found that this gives me a better outcome. There's 2 woods that I brought, curly maple and walnut. And walnut's a turner's dream. The curly maple is a turner's nightmare. And this is like turning burl. The grain patterns go every which way, but I like it in the kaleidoscope because it gives a unique chatoyance, a reflection once you finish it. And so we're going to see how well I can come out and give a reasonable result here. As I said, I'm not familiar with this lathe entirely, but it's a lathe, I hope. I will usually start out with the rough and gouge. For the young turners, ABC. Anchor, bevel, use all your senses. Obviously, this is coming loose. And you heard the squeak. One thing I didn't tell you also is I'm ambidextrous. So I don't mean to confuse you, but I go both ways. Okay, leverage. Now, since I've rounded off the edges, my tool is hanging over my fulcrum. You don't want to be in a situation where your bevel is behind the edge of your tool rest. It's going to be kicked down and back. So the flat of the tool should be on the tool rest. Now, the other thing that I haven't heard many turners talk about is the angle at which you address the wood. And let's just make a few comments about that. So if I had a traditional skew that was one of those straight guys, and I go in like this, there's a lot of wood that's going to be impacting the edge of my tool, right? So if you happen to curve the tool, you're reducing the total amount of wood that's impacting the edge of your tool. Now you can also take this and go this way. And then you're developing more of a slicing, cutting action. Now, if you go way over, then it's a much more gentle cut. It's almost a shaving action. And so that as I get away from the out of round edging and I come closer to round, I will tend in this wood to shift the orientation of my tool so I'm doing much more of a slicing thing. So the curly maple, as you can already see, chips out a lot. And that's a major difficulty or a problem. So we'll continue to use the roughing gouge to closer to round. I'm beginning to change the orientation of the tool. So it's not perpendicular, it's less than perpendicular, it's a much more shallow angle. So let's see where we're at here. You can see that there's tear out, but there's a few flats left, but we're pretty close to being round. So now it's pretty much the same idea with the skew. Dave Hout, is he here? Gave a demo a couple months ago, and he orients his skew much more to the surface, with the tool rest a little higher. And is addressing the wood almost a little more in a flat way. I grind my skew with a slight curve to it, so it's not completely flat. That way it helps me avoid catches and digging in from the heel or toe. So I don't usually do a peeling cut as he was demonstrating on soft wood. Here, I'll address my cuts at a much more acute angle and hopefully get a smoother result, if that makes sense to you. Now, for the young turners, what I do is it's anchor, and I'll apply the side of the tool to the wood, and then lift my handle and initiate the cut. Now, in my shop at home, I have a Harbor Freight single line LED light. And I find that an advantage. I don't know if you can see here, but there's a sheen. To me, there's a reflection of light off the top surface. Over here, there's not, because it's very rough. So I'm monitoring by feeling the wood, so there's a much more consistent cutting action here. This is where the flats were that I was pointing out earlier. So there's more chatter. This is a little proud here. Okay, well, let's see what we got. There's a little bit of a chip out here and here, a little bit over here, and that's inherent to curly maple, I'm afraid, in my experience. I don't know if anybody's had any better experience with that. Again, I'm just laying the tool on the wood, lifting the handle in order to start the cut, keeping my angle very shallow. So I'm really shaving off the top surface. better. Okay, now I'm not one for too much adventure, so I go back to my 100 grit scraper. I don't know in terms of how much dust we're going to make here, but again, this is a relatively flat sheet of paper, so I'll use a full sheet or a half in order to get this totally flat. So it's another way of cheating to get this thing completely smooth. You could take this and glue it onto a flat board and keep that level and even. But I found this is quick and dirty. 60 scratch. I know, I didn't bring any. You're right. Now, by sometimes taking this and angling it, you're extending the area that's flat. Not perfect, but for the sake of the environment, I'm not going to finish it off. Basically, I think everybody's had the experience of sanding where you go from double your grit from 100 to 180 to 220, 320, 400, etc. And the video will address that as well. So, yeah, I mean, if you're cutting down a tree and you're staying away from the pith, you're out in the perimeter and you have a consistent, what do you call it, a homogeneous piece of wood, you know, you can do the same thing. In fact, there's different glue-up methodologies as well, whereas you don't have to do the 30-30-30 on each edge. You could do an overlap. Right? This way, I found for the most part, it's much harder to identify the seam lines, and you get a reasonable result. The rule was meant with backlighting to show that there's no gap and that the planed edge was the perfect straight edge. No, in fact, that's one thing about glass cutting, is that once you score your line, don't go back and score it again. You only do it once. You got one shot at it. Otherwise, you're going to have things go every which way. This is the $400 machine Dean Cross uses a unique system with a micrometer on the right-hand side, so that this system's adapted for little itty-bitty scopes, where you're really making the mirror system that's very, very small. But because of the way it's set up, it's very precise and you don't get any wobble. Here again, I spent a lot of time on this in the video and on the discussion because it's a critically important component. Remember I said that there's only a few critically important components. Now, if you've not been accustomed to breaking glass, there's a number of ways. One of which is just tapping it. You make a score line, you turn it over, and you tap where your score line is. And it doesn't take much energy, but it cracks. And here's a serpentine piece of glass, and you can see how the score line is developing and breaking through, even though the break is not complete. But I was trying to show that, but the light didn't really demonstrate it very well. Glass is a fascinating material. It's technically a supercooled liquid. If you go in an old house, it's about 110 years old, and you look at the windows, you'll see a waviness down at the lower part of the glass because it's sagging over 100 years. Now I demonstrated circle cutting because that's a possible component to what you might want to do to contain object pieces inside the wood tube. I use a little Lazy Susan here, but you can do the same thing by using a piece of paper, or I like these little pieces of cut off from sanding packets because they have plastic coating and it slips on the surface. So you put the mirror on there and then you turn it around by hand as you're cutting. That's cutting off the gross excess. However, in using a pliers, you put the nose of the pliers right up to the score line and then apply a little flexion to it, and it comes off. And that piece is this piece.
You scored that on both sides?
No, one side only.
What'd you do on the second side?
Nothing. You just break it.
It looked like you flipped it over exactly on the other side.
When you apply stress to the glass opposite the score line. So if you're scoring this surface, then you turn it and you try to separate it along this score line. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you can play. Okay, I made the circle. Yeah. Oh, I was just demonstrating the different tools along the same straight edge. There's different ways of holding it, but the critical factor is, yeah. Anyone works, but the critical factor is don't wobble. Right. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was one thing that. Now, even though I'm using the magic mirror machine of Mr. Krause here, the same thing can be done with this. So what I'm demonstrating is sometimes one way to do it, but I also am emphasizing the fact you don't need to go out and buy a whole bunch of expensive equipment in order to achieve your results. So here again, that mirror ultimately will go in here, but as you can see, it's much longer on either end. So the objective is to get rid of those tags on either end, and it's hard to make out, but I've already scribbled a black line on the ends of each of those strips of mirror so that I can keep track that I'm not cutting 2 times off the same end.
You're cutting on the glass surface rather than the mirror surface, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Now, a 3-mirror system gives you an infinite reflection. You get a reflection upon reflection upon reflection upon reflection. And so these were using whole sheets of mirror, and I wasn't using the first surface, I was using the second surface just for demonstration purposes. And as you get lower on, you can see off into the horizon in every direction. There's a continuation of the image. Now, you can go in fancy calculations and establish a 37.5 degree angle, etc., and it's going to frustrate the hell out of you to try to get a 37.5 degree angle for XYZ number of points on the star. You don't need to do any calculations. You have the 2 mirrors, here's one edge and here's the other edge, and a straight line between them. And then you're just bringing the edges of the mirrors together until you get a perfect 5-point star here, and there's no breaks in any of the arms or legs. And you can do that for, 3, 4, 5, 20, 30 image reflections if you want. 2. Just 2. So this little gimmick or this little techniques saved me a lot of consternation over time. I used to try to calculate the angles. Here I don't bother with any calculations. So in a 3-mirror assembly, that's the way they all go together. A little bit of overlap here, a little bit of overlap, and a little bit of overlap, and they're all overlapping in the same way. It doesn't take much to break a mirror. I mean, you saw that it almost breaks as you lift it off the cutting surface. There is a protective coating you want to keep on as long as you possibly can. And so that's what I'm cutting away with an X-Acto knife, is that plastic coating. When I first dealt with first surface mirror, I thought it was kind of a sacrosanct thing, and I was afraid of it. And it's expensive, so I didn't want to mess it up. However, one of the old kaleidoscope makers gave me a piece of advice one time, and that is when you design and construct a device, think about how you're going to fix it or repair it right from the beginning. And the other thing is make an extra one and break it. Destroy it. And find out where your weaknesses are and where your design errors are. And so now that I've been trying to play with experimenting with what can you do with violating the mirror surface to get an image. That mirror is tougher, the aluminum surface is tougher than you think it is. They make it by putting a piece of glass in a vacuum chamber and creating a fog of aluminum that settles on the mirror in the vacuum and adheres, and so you get a perfectly smooth surface. There's a scope over there that's triangular, and it's about so long, a little ball at the end. That one is made with purposely violating the mirror surface, and it'll knock your eyes out. So make a point of looking for that one. The tradition in a two-mirror system is to completely block out that second or that third side. So then you're focusing only on the round mandala, and you're not getting the infinite reflection. That way you get the cathedral window type of image. And so I put black felt on a scrap piece of glass, cut the dimensions that I need. Now, I got adventuresome here because I knew that that protective coating was not particularly adherent to the mirror, and so I just pulled it away. Not a good thing to do, but I have experience. And this technique is much more appropriate and safer, because what you're doing is pulling the protective surface not up and away, but tangentially away from the mirror surface. So you put your finger down and you're pulling the protective covering here as you're holding down the mirror with this finger lightly. If you pull up, you're putting stress on the center of the mirror and you're going to break the mirror. So you keep your hand as low as possible to the mirror and pull it away that way. Now, when I was creating the video, the tendency for everybody is to record a perfect demonstration, show you how it's right. I've always maintained that when I go to demos, sometimes I learn more how to do things when they're doing it wrong, or when an experienced turner runs into trouble and they bail themselves out of a problem. This is not a good demonstration of how to establish three mirrors together. Because what I did is I just loosely picked up all three mirrors, and when you're doing that, one edge is going to scrape against the silvered surface of the other and scratch it, and you get an imperfect picture. Fortunately, I got away with it, and it turned out okay. But in constructing the two-mirror system, which is next, I will show you a more appropriate way of maintaining the mirror stability and alignment while you're putting them together. So you can do it this way, but there's a risk to it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. In fact, I think I demonstrate that in the two-mirror system. Glass cleaner. There's This stuff is Home Depot or Lowe's. This is safe to use on the silvered surface. Windex has ammonia in it many times, and I tend not to use that on the silvered surfaces. For other glass applications, I'll use Windex to do it. Paper towel, if you're ginger with it and you're not pushing on it too hard, is fine to wipe off the moisture and the excess liquid. Better yet, and I don't know, somewhere in here, are the microfiber cloths. If you use for glasses cleaning, that's the best. Sometimes there's debris where the mirrors form the gutter, the vertex angle, and so unfolding the mirrors while the Scotch tape is behind it and using a microfiber cloth down the center of it gets rid of the dust, dirt, etc. And then the last thing that I do usually when I close up a mirror system is that I'll take canned air. If you have clean air, you'll compress air from a compressor, but I'll shoot it right down the barrel from both ends and get anything out, and then I'll immediately close it up. See, there's a microfiber cloth that I was wiping down the edge. A little tidbit from an experienced kaleidoscope maker. He used to, if he saw some residual dirt in there in the gutter, he'd take a piece of cardboard, thin cardboard, and tear it. And then you get this fuzzy edge, and that's like a brush. And he'd run it down the center. So it's a cheap way of cleaning up your whoopses. So I put tape on the table, put a mirror down so it's on both the upper and lower tape. Then I take the second mirror, align the bottom edge of it, slowly put it down so it's adjacent and touching the first piece of mirror and approximating the angle that I guesstimate I will need when the thing's finally put together. And then I bring up the tape behind that, and usually that kind of holds things in position. So after that, I get the felted piece of plain glass and put one edge on there, kind of as, I don't know if you call it tripod or whatever. And the felt is nice because it doesn't allow the mirror edges to slip and splay outward. It kind of holds it. So when you get the first mirror in the first strip of mirror into position, then I run a bead of hot glue. Don't move anything until it's getting back to being frosty in color and not clear. Then you know it's cool enough that it's going to hold its position. And then I turn the thing over and do that little trick with a straight line, looking down the mirrors onto a piece of paper. And this is all you need, is a straight line on a piece of paper, and you're adjusting the mirrors until you get the 5-point, 6-point star, 7-point star, without a broken line, and keep your thumb on it, and then you run the hot glue down the other side, and then you have your two-mirror system. Now, I have, as a matter of habit, put round pieces of glass on both ends in order to maintain a closed environment so I don't get dust inside or debris. That's not necessary if you're going to have a closed kaleidoscope. So I didn't have to do that on this one. I could have left it open and just put the mirrors in there and then closed up both ends. In this kaleidoscope, though, for your benefit, I wanted you to see the difference between a 3-mirror and a 2-mirror system, so I built both. And if you come up to play with this is held on by magnets, and I can pull out one mirror system, pull out the other, and line up the magnets, and then I have an interchangeable mirror system, but I'm keeping this clean by the end-piece glasses. Not a requirement. If you're a beginner, keep it simple. So I would do the simple tubular construction and use a 3-mirror system, make it a kaleidoscope with a simple ball, and you'll have something that's quite credible, quite usable, and I think your friends and relatives will appreciate it.
What holds the ball in the tube?
That is the, let's see out here. I use UV glue. There's a variety of glues that you can use, but I run a little bead on the inside diameter there, and then put the barrel on top of that and quickly bring up my UV light to cure it. It only takes 2 to 3 seconds to get initially hard.
Is that clear glue?
Yes. UV glue is nice because it's almost instantaneous. In 20 seconds, it's fully cured. And I defy you to, if you glue 2 pieces of glass together, it's like tight bond, right? You know, the glue line's not going to fail, the wood will fail before the glue line fails. Same thing with the UV glue.
Do you buy pre-made prisms, the mirrors?
No, I just buy sheet mirror. Now, there are a variety of sources. I think you can buy pre-cut mirror, then you have to measure your body to fit the mirror. I do it the other way around by just habit. And that is Kaleidescopes to You and Boston Craft are 2 sources for that. So if you're not into cutting mirror, maybe for your first kaleidoscope, you don't want to buy a chunk of mirror. The 18 by 20, what was it? I don't know, 12 by 18 sheet can, in some sources, be $60. But that's not necessarily the price. You can get it for cheaper than that. Now, we're pretty close to noon, and there are, I think, 2 other modules, right, Joe? One demonstrates the complete assembly of this kaleidoscope and putting the pieces together, doing the UV gluing, inserting the mirrors, and it also demonstrates making the end cap. If you take the end cap off of here, you'll see how it's machined, if you will, or turned. And basically, I just put a round piece of wood in a compression chuck and turn out the inside here. I recess the inside at another level to accommodate my lens. Then I flip it around and I use the chuck in expansion mode to hold on to it, and then turn the outside of it and finish it. So it's, you know, you guys can do that very easily. It's no magic. And then if you're using the lathe in order to bore the internal diameter, and using a Forstner bit all the way through, or a large diameter standard bit, you're not worried about the mismatch of going from either end. In the event that there is some mismatch, you can, I use a rasp and then a file. Sometimes I use my spindle sander. There's a whole number of ways of addressing that. But just clean out the barrel. You know, I will take a piece of paper towel, maybe some alcohol as a wetting agent, and just run it through both ways to get all the dust and debris out. Sometimes I'll even take a little shellac or OB shine juice, put that on a paper towel and kind of semi-finish the inside so that there's no loose debris. And then that way you can seal it without having those glass circles. So that hopefully gets you to the point you can get a simple kaleidoscope and gives you a lot of food for thought for what you can do with the others. As I said, there are two other modules. One's to complete the kaleidoscope and the end cap, and the last one is how to make an object case out of acrylic. And that's a much more long, involved thing. So those will be on the web, so you have that as reference as well, in a similar style to what you see here. Some people have asked me, how long does it take to make a kaleidoscope? I don't know. You know, as you can tell, and I'm sure that you're all sensitive to, is a lot of your time is set up and takedown of your equipment. You know, if you're fortunate to have a shop and you have a station dedicated to each procedure, that's beautiful. But, you know, in the final finishing of an acrylic object case, I have to get my router table set up and get a flush trim bit on it, and it's a whole bunch of stuff. I'll parenthetically say also that if you're going to make an object case and do it fancy like this, and I polish the sides, if you're going to put that inside a kaleidoscope, you don't have to do all that finishing. Nobody's going to see it. So think about what people are going to see and what they're not going to see, and save yourself some time. That gives you an image where the mandala looks like a sphere. So I did one based on a world theme, and so I wanted it to look like the Earth. So I used the tapered mirror, 3-mirror system, and then you have something that looks like a ball at the end. In fact, if you come up here, I don't know which. Yep. Look at this one. Thank you.